Weird. Oh, I can't do it on my phone. I don't know why. I've had to turn my computer on, but I didn't want to do it on my computer because my computer's overheating lately.
It's actually made us go straight to live.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I tried so hard to get it on my computer, but it just wouldn't, on my phone, but it just wouldn't do it.
Yes, please. Okay. Thank you. Cris isn't here yet. Okay, we're having Mercury retrograde. Let's just work with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's not the first thing I've experienced that I've been reminded it's Mercury retrograde because I never know. But I don't know why, but this is just not working for me. So if I overheat, I'm terribly sorry. I'll come back as soon as I can.
That's okay. I don't know what's happened to Cris. I'm guessing she's running late.
Hello,
guys in chat.
Retrograded. She's in Mercury retrograded too, is she? Oh dear, bless us. Do you want to start, or shall we just?
I think we're going to have to because it's gone live automatically, and I'm just checking people can see us and everything in the chat. It's never gone live automatically before. How bizarre!
How pushy! We're not ready yet, damn it!
Yep. Everyone can see us. Okay. Hi. Okay, hi guys in chat. We're waiting for Cris, so I'm not sure where she is. I'm guessing she's running slightly late, and KellyAnn's limited on time. So we're gonna just start the video. We're gonna start talking about shadow work.
Yeah, I guess Cris can hop in.
Cris has got the link, so when she's here, she'll turn up hopefully in a minute.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
It's so dark in here.
Yep. So everybody here should know who KellyAnn Maddox is. KellyAnn Maddox is a YouTuber, a spiritual counselor, a card slinger. She's one of my favorite YouTubers, and one of the only people who I've interested with tarot readings for myself. So, Cris. I was just doing the introductions. You're all right.
Gotta be. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Deep breaths.
Yes. I am here. I have water.
Oh, I look at my water as well.
All right.
Yeah, you carry on and I'll.
So it's just introducing KellyAnn. We've clearly got Mercury retrograde because the minute KellyAnn joined, it went live. I didn't click go live. It just did it.
Oh my gosh.
So it's going to be one of those live chats.
It's my whole energy. I was born live. I don't know what off air means. If I'm awake, I'm on air, damn it.
Yep. Yeah. Sounds about the long and short of it. Okay. Right. So can I see? Yes, I can see chat. So that's something. So I can see what everybody else is asking. So we're going to be talking about shadow work today. And this is something that KellyAnn does a lot of work with. She's also got Self-Love September upcoming. So we thought that the topic that we briefly touched on in mine and Chris's last live chat, which was the idea of shadow work, punishment versus motivation. And that sort of came up in kind of the flow of the last Google Hangout that we did. And we thought that was a subject really worth delving into. And seeing as KellyAnn was willing to come on and talk to us in our madness, in our Mercury retrograde madness, we thought that would be a really good place to start. So are you all right there, Cris?
Good to go now.
You're good to go now.
As I came barreling into the live chat. Yep, I've got the chat and everything, so carry on.
Oh, I was going to ask if you wanted to recap about motivation versus punishment.
Oh yeah, so it came from you can have passion without punishment. Like it doesn't be a trade-off. You can be passionate about something and not have like giving up something that means a lot to you. You mean like you don't have to compromise that necessarily. And then from that it went to the difference of punishment versus motivation to get you to do things. So it kind of veered off that way. With my business and everything, I self goals with the money that I have that's towards my business. so that it keeps me motivated to keep going. Like, it's a very tactile thing. But there are things where you'll know, like, okay, this is not even close to a realistic goal here. And you like hold kind of a hammer your own head, I guess to say, to the extent where it becomes more of a looming cloud than a motivator. And so I guess that's kind of where I was going when I started talking about that.
Okay. So do we want to phrase this in kind of like a question and go around the group? So it's three of us, confusing. So I guess, how would we each feel that shadow work can be used to like punish the self rather than to motivate the self? Because I think shadow work is something, particularly when we're getting into this time of the year, when we're heading towards September, October, heading towards the dark half of the year, that a lot of people become more focused on for whatever reason. You know, maybe the environment affects the psychology of it, and people feel, oh, it's time for shadow work now. So how do we feel like that shadow work can be a sort of punishment if we're not careful? How can we punish ourselves whilst looking at our shadows?
Should I start?
Yes, go for it.
The main way that I've done it, and that I've seen people doing it, and that we've had to kind of work on correcting, is judgment. So it's kind of like when you go into shadow, you're basically looking at all of your crappy bits, your negative tendencies, the habits that have become cyclical, that are really hard to break. And that is actually, if you're in the mode of self-punishment, that's actually a supermarket full of shit you can use against yourself. So you're actually walking into actually quite a high risk environment in terms of your self-development journey when you start to go into shadow, because you've got all this material that you could actually just ball up and just throw at yourself. And that actually does happen. I think a lot of people don't think there's a risk of that, but naturally there is, because you're going to that part in the psyche where all the stuff is that you can look at and go, I'm so shit, I can't believe I haven't dealt with this, I can't believe it's still going on, I can't believe I'm not strong enough to deal with it, I can't find a way to deal with it, other people seem to be dealing with it and I'm just drowning in it. And so it leads to a lot of negative self-talk. So one of the main things that I try to put across about shadow work is that it's about adopting a position of non-judgment. It's about going up into the crown, as we say, and looking down from the crown chakra at your ego self and saying, oh, why am I doing that? That's interesting. Why do I keep walking around that block? Why don't I choose this pathway or this pathway? And it's about looking at it like a scientist would, or like an investigator, completely without attachment to any judgment at all. You're not looking at yourself going, what the fuck am I doing there? You're looking at yourself going, okay, well, that's an interesting thing. I can use that. Let me look at that and see why that is occurring and what the root of it is. So it's really about where you start from. And I feel like it's easy once you look at yourself to see if you're starting from a place of judgment and using your shadows against you. And if you are, you have to take ultimate responsibility for saying, okay, I'm not ready for this, because every time I look at the stuff that's going wrong, I'm using it to hit myself, and that's not self-loving. So essentially it's about figuring out, are you looking at what you're doing from a place of judgment and from a place of criticism, or from a place of openness to just observe patterns and learn from them?
Yeah, I a lot of times I call that in my practice like the forest and the tree. Tree where you can be the forest. How are you going to look at this? From the forest, there's a lot less judgment. Yeah,
that's true. It's about perspective, basically.
Well, I was thinking that one of the things that kind of is an offshoot of that is kind of the comparison element, where we look at our own shadows and we compare ourselves to other people. And it might not even be about other people's shadows. It might be about the best parts of someone else's life that we're seeing. And I love the idea of stop judging your behind the scenes to somebody else's on stage, because then we sort of come to shadow work from a place of, oh, well, everybody else has it all together and it's just me that can't cope with X, Y, and Z, or this person has achieved this in this amount of time and I can't keep up, or whatever the shadow is. It's kind of like taking it out of yourself and comparing it to somebody else's experiences. And that can even be the way that someone else handles their shadow. You know, someone else seems to be able to cope better with this shadow. Somebody else seems to be able to take their shadow and use it as a motivator for them. And I'm struggling with this, and maybe I need help with this, or maybe I need to talk to someone about this. And then that becomes a self-judgment, like KellyAnn has been talking about, because rather than sit with our own shadow and sit with ourselves, we're kind of looking outside of ourselves and comparing ourselves to other people's experiences, pains, ways of dealing with things, and feeling that then makes us smaller, like taking it to a place of shrinking who we are. So that was the one that kind of stood out to me when I was thinking about the ways in which we punish ourselves.
Yeah,
well, and even like you were saying, looking at, I'm sorry, basing it on experience, that you think that they have is your perception too. So like, you know, that still isn't concrete. Anyway.
You're making notes there.
I'm making notes as well. I was going to say that meme is interesting because I think it specifically relates to social media as a way that we like look at people and compare our behind the scenes to their highlight reel, because the highlight reel these days is so much about what we put online. Like, yes, everybody will always present their best selves at a party, or if you meet them in the street and you say, how are things? They're not going to go, well, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to go, oh, they're shit, I'm having a nightmare. They're always going to pick up on the bits that are great and deliver those bits, you know. And so social media is the key way that we can see the presentation of everybody's best bits. And when you're doing shadow work, especially when you're doing consistent, dedicated shadow work, which most people do choose, as you mentioned, Joey, the dark half of the year to do, you have to actually, I think, be hyper aware of your ability to use that as a rod to beat yourself with. And I think for a lot of people that I've worked with, they've actually taken time away from social media or reduced their exposure to certain social media platforms whilst doing shadow work, because they're aware of a tendency to be like, I bet they don't have these problems. They don't seem to have these issues with money or with relationships or with, you know, body image or whatever. And so you're actually, because you're balls deep in shadow every day, you have to recognize that some stuff isn't helpful and you're not going to be able to cope with it as well as you ordinarily would. And there's no weakness in that. Just spend less time on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's not only just in internalizing. Some people lash out more too during it. I mean, because that is essentially internalizing, but we think of that as in like taking it in and then like clamming up because, you know, we feel like crap. But like there's also people that when they're going through it we're very sensitive. So like you'll lash out more because you feel hurt. You know, like an animal cornered and, you know, like they're going to defend themselves because it's the last thing they know to do. So that perception happens too. So yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of people back away from social media, maybe even going out some. Oh.
Well, yeah. Social media is one of these weird modern day crises things, because on the one hand, it's like one of the most useful, interesting, connective tools that we can utilize to connect with people all over the world, and we can make friends that we probably never would have made otherwise, because we don't travel so much and all the rest of it. And then on the flip side of that is it exposes us to the other side of things, where it's much easier to compare ourselves to other people like we're just talking about, but also receive all sorts of nonsense and have people like poke our shadows for better or worse. Sometimes we get our shadows poked just by observing other people, and sometimes people are just mean, and then that pokes a shadow, which is something that I dealt with this weekend, which is people being unpleasant to the point where I'm already in a place of shadow work and I'm dealing with these issues, and then someone goes, well, actually you are ugly. And then, you know, without social media, that anonymous nonsense wouldn't have been able to have gotten to me, and then kind of like put an extra brick on top of the wall that is shadow work. So it can be a real lifesaver sometimes to just to disengage from social media and go out in the forest or go out wherever calms your mind. and your soul, really.
Yeah, another thing to do really is, I think a lot of people are more savvy on this now, is regular like sweep and clearing. Just recognizing, like, you know what, every time this account comes up, I'm pissed off, or this person only has negative shit to say to me. It's like they're waiting for an inning to jab me. And whether that's true or not, if you are aware that that's how you feel, and you still got this person on your feed, or you're still following them, or you're still checking on them, or whatever, then it's about the personal accountability to say, you know what, I'm going to unfriend, or I'm going to unfollow, I'm not going to engage with this person, I'm going to like unfollow their notifications or whatever. And then the other thing, and this is the much more difficult thing, is when something like that happens during shadow work, where somebody really pushes my buttons, I have come to be able to see that as a gift. I've come to see it as a cosmic signpost that says, oh, you're doing shadow work? Awesome. Hey, I've just hit you in the feels because I want you to look here, because this is something that you really don't like. I'm just really giving you a dose of it so you can dive right in. And so I grit my teeth and like clench my fists and go, thank you, Cosmos, for that. That was fucking great. Let me get my notebook out. So seeing it as a gift,
yeah,
is something I've come to be able to do. It does take a bit of time in certain cases, but yeah.
Yeah, I've come to the point now where I see it as in terms of masks, which is something that we've talked about a lot, that often people who are going through shadow work, and whether this be proactively going through shadow work or not, sometimes they wear their shadow on their face. So when so when they are being unpleasant, being negative, whatever that they're doing, that's them wearing their shadow on their face. So a lot of the time, say if somebody's attacking you for the way that you look, it may easily, and quite often is, to do with their own insecurities about the way that they look, so they're lashing out instead. And so I've come to the point where most of the time, because we had this whole eclipse happen and all these shadows came down on my head all at once, and I didn't cope with it at all. It was a mess. But I'm getting to the point as well where that's okay with me as well. Like sometimes we punish ourselves, to take it back to the idea of the topic. We punish ourselves for being a mess because of our shadows. We punish ourselves for breaking down or crying or letting it get to us. Like, oh, I just should know better. I've been on this spiritual path X amount of years. Yeah. And I shouldn't be letting people get to me. That's something people have said to me a few times, like, you shouldn't allow X or Y person to get to you. And I don't agree with that necessarily. I'm like, well, you don't invite everybody into your personal space to have a jab at you, no. But on the other hand, that's kind of judging the emotional reaction to something that I might have needed to know about. I needed that lesson. I needed to feel sad. I needed to break down. I needed to cry, because that was the truth of it. And I'm not going to walk around being robotic about it, because that's not spiritual at all for me. Sometimes spiritual progression is the mess, is the chaos, is the falling apart, and then the gathering of everything that's on the floor to see, you know, how did I fall down, and what caved, and what was the unsecure beam that led me to fall down this hole, and then work on that. And that's kind of sometimes the point of shadow work, is to fall apart and then stand up and go, okay, why, and which bits hurt and why they hurt, and then trying to making friends with the fact that sometimes we are a mess, and that's okay to be human, because that's kind of the point of spirituality.
Yeah, I wanted to say in response to that, like, for me, when you're trying to vent about something that's happened with another person, whether it's an actual scenario that's been come about, or whether it's just feelings you have about this person and they're not even aware of it, I feel like, yes, there is something about being shut down where you're actually not allowed to vent, and you're not allowed to be in your emotion. You've got to be in it first, you know, before you figure out what you can do with it and how you can use it. There's something about that that's it feels like a dismissal of your honest reaction. And if you've gone to a place in, you know, for safe space to vent with a loved one, or with a professional, a counsellor or whatever, to be told you shouldn't let that person get to you, it's going to be counterproductive, because it has gotten to you and you're trying to kind of like process it. And a lot of people do that through talking. I know that I do that through talking to someone in what I consider to be a safe environment. where it's not on social media. I'm not splashing my shit all over the place. I'm going somewhere privately with someone I trust. On the other hand, though, I think that for me, it gets to a point where I need to have a cut-off point, because I know that shadow work can only ever be about me. It is only about me. And that's one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn, is that actually when I'm sitting there picking apart what somebody else's shadow is and how their shadow is messed with my shadow, or how they need to deal with their shadow shit because I don't actually have the shadow shit and they're the one that has the shadow shit and I'm dealing with their shadow shit. That's not the work. That isn't the work. And I still don't actually like that, because I feel that I'm a very perceptive human being, and I feel I often can see what somebody else's fucking problem is. But that is a point of security. That is a point of safety for me to say, oh, I can really see what's going on with that person. They're really bringing all their shadow shit to me, and I can really sit here and figure out what it all is, and I can talk to this person about what it all is. But that's just my point of safety. What's my work? What's my work? Because that's the only thing that matters. I can't make anyone else do theirs. And God, I hate that. I hate even saying that, but it's true. It is true.
I also have that same experience, KellyAnn. So I'm over here like, yes, exactly.
Oh yeah, and me. Yeah, and me. I think it comes with. I think all three of us are natural. We naturally resonate in kind of like dark goddess energy and things like that. So it.
Okay. Right. I would venture to say that we all also like to pick things apart and analyze it, and like, take the gum out of something and chew on it and stick it in our hair for a while, like, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, we're like three surgeons.
Yeah.
Weaving fate over here in the shadow realm, like pulling apart threads and cutting them anyway. So I think it's your turn, Cris. Did you talk to us about ways that you thought punished for shadow work?
Yeah, I have not yet. Hold on.
Every time.
Every single live chat now.
Oh,
he's my friend. That's why he hears my voice. He comes running.
He's like, "Oh, you're going live? I'll just take up the whole chat." I can just see his head popping up in front while I'm talking now, like I'm just waiting for it. Anyway, no, so I guess how I punish myself is, it's a cool bullshit. The one thing that KellyAnn touched on about how stuck in the analyzing and not do your own thing. I do that a lot. I will worry about unnecessary things also, like just utterly unnecessary. Why are you analyzing this? This is not an immediate thing that you need to deal with. Just to like not do things, and it really is a punishment in the long run, because I'm working at myself. I'm essentially putting myself second or third or fourth, and that's not when you do shadow work. Is working on you. So this is spending time with you and not people, like she said. And a self too, because you're like, well, I'll get to Mediator. Let's do this thing. Let's figure out this. So let's do that. Let's pick the surface of the scab, but not really like do the wound,
Yeah.
And so I think that's the one that I tend to do the most. And then I have to kind of like center my stuff back and be like, look, what are you doing? But at the same time, not punish myself for doing it, because that's really easy to get into. Is I've gotten off track now. I'm crap at this. I should have seen this, or and so you kind of have to, like she said, like step back and the perspective, and then be like, you know what, nope, because there was a lesson in that. There was a lesson in that procrastination, I guess you could call it, in taking that way around, because this time I learned more about myself, and every time I do it, ideally I would like to not, but shadow work isn't about ideals necessarily, or maybe it is about.
Do you mean ideally you would like to not do it, or ideally you would not like to?
Ideally I would like to not, like skirt around things. I would like to just address it, but that's not really how shadow work always.
Yeah.
A lot of times it
can be sneaky.
You, oh, that pretty picture you have. That's cute.
oh, you thought you were dealing with this thing?
Right.
Guess what?
Yeah, I get this feeling of, oh, you thought you were in a paddling pool with armbands. Picture in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yes.
It's like, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah. Sudden realization that you're so far out from shore, and where have you put yourself? Yeah.
Because you've been worried about a flower on the bank.
It's often a lot bigger than, it's like when you think you're on an island and then you're actually on a whale, and then the whale just it's a myth, isn't there? Like, can't remember what the myth is now, but they just set up shop on the back of a whale, and they're like, guys, it's a fucking whale. We're not an island. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto.
Well, that's also like anytime that people are like, I have found it. I have found the shadow. I've found the root of it, and that's the end. I feel like,
no. The minute I feel like the minute anybody gets to that point, like the universe is like, oh really? That's a challenge. You found the end point.
Yeah, I don't think you can say. I think that I believe shadows can be integrated. I believe shadows can leave your shadowscape and not be in shadow anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't teach shadow work, because if there's no actual success, if nothing changes, then there's no point in doing it. It's just like, it's a permanent problem. You can't shadow work it. But I do think there's a danger in declaring, I've reached the end now. I think that is not something you can do. It's like that Alan Watts talk where he's talking about like Brahman, like the essential nature of Godhead, and he says, like, if you say you understand it, then you don't understand it, and if you admit that you don't understand it, then you actually do, because it can't be understood. It can only be lived. And I think that's the same with shadow work. The minute I go, oh, I've wrapped that up in a neat little bow, which always happens way too soon. If ego wants to get in and go, that's sorted, that is well done, you can go home now, then invariably that's not true. Normally what happens when I know I've integrated it is I see it in my behavior. I see it in the way I respond to my challenges, and I go, well, shit, look at me go. I wouldn't have done it like that 6 months ago. And so the proof is in the pudding for me. The minute I start to say, I've wrapped this up, then that is always a lie every time.
Yeah. Also, heart to you for quoting Alan Watts. Love him. Yeah, that's actually more so what I meant. Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that a little more. That is what I meant, is like that idea of like, that's it, we're done, whee! Yeah. And it's like, no. I mean, you can have pep in your step for like finding and illuminating things, but there's an extent where it's like, okay, but are we just kind of putting it in a fancy dress and calling it pretty?
Yeah.
Like, are we?
Yeah. No, just don't pop the champagne too soon. I think if you're really confident that you've sorted something out and you can end your shadow work on that particular issue, then I would probably advise a client that was going through shadow work with me to give me 3 examples that prove that to be true. So I would like 3 examples from your life of times where this has come into your line of sight and you haven't melted down or lost your shit or done what you said you wanted to set out to get rid of when you first started. And if you can give yourself those examples of like, right, well, last week my mum said that thing that usually makes me want to punch her in the face, and actually I dealt with it like this, and I've never done it like that before. Normally I just punch her in the face. Oh, no, I'm not quite that severe.
At the halfway point I punched her in the face and then it didn't bother me.
I realised that was what I needed to do. I finally balled up my fist. Why am I joking about violence? I'm so sorry. But you know, that I think it's about examples. It's not about the ego will say any old shit and pop the champagne immediately. Hey, I'm done. I'm a superstar. Shadow superstar. And I think that if you can like say, well, hang on a minute, where's the proof? Let's have a look at it. Let's give me some receipts, bitch. Then if the receipts are there, then it's probably likely you can put that bit of shadow work down and congratulate yourself, but not until you can prove it. Because if something's really painful as well, we might want to lie to ourselves and say it's done. Sometimes when I'm like tidying and organising and cleaning my entire flat, I definitely have a moment where I'm like, that's pretty much, it's in a pile, fuck it, I'm going to bed.
Or like if you're like, I'm the cleaner that throws everything on the bed.
Oh, I am a big one for that.
Right? And then you look around and you're like, all right, I'm done. And then you look back at the bed and you're like,
yeah, I hate that feeling. Or I put stuff in the bathroom. I leave piles of clothes in the bathroom and I'm like, they'll be sorted out last. And then I go to have a bath and I'm like, oh, bollocks. Why? Yeah, that's a good
my husband and I call that future self and past self. And that past self is sometimes a dick. At that, but now future self has to deal with it.
I was going to ask you guys if you feel the same way about this, about sometimes when I start doing shadow work, when I start doing a committed journey of shadow work, which I normally know I'm directing towards certain things, or I have a list of the things that I know are not going well, where I'm like avoiding something, I feel like it's very punishing because I'm agreeing with myself to go through it. And as a result, things do change, and not everything that changes is great. Like sometimes relationships suffer because I won't stay stuck in a pattern anymore. I won't stay stuck in a pattern of collusion anymore. I may need to reduce my, you know, the influence that certain people have on me, or I just start making decisions that are different to what people are used to. That's a key way in which I've started doing shadow work, and I've been like, well, things are changing for the not so, well, what feels like at the moment the not so better. And I also look around and think other people aren't doing this. These people that I feel also have issues and also could be doing their shadow work, they're not doing this. And I'm almost feeling like I'm plunging myself into this thing, which is grueling, which is cleansing, but which is very time consuming and very energy draining at times. And I feel like I want to see it as a blessing and as something I need to do and something that improves me. But it's hard sometimes not to feel like, well, why should I punish myself with all this deep, complex shit? Why can't I just carry on as I am? Like, you know, why do I have to dedicate myself to this thing, which is actually really difficult and which involves so much journaling that my hand is in permanent cramp mode now, because I can't do this kind of thing on a laptop. It's got to be on paper. And I almost feel like it's hard not to see shadow work as a punishment in itself, because it's hard. And I feel like I sometimes look at people that don't do it, or they don't do it in such a grueling, full-on way, and I think, is this too punishing? But then the results in the end are always so majestic that I realize in the end it's not. I just have to walk through that fire.
So I've just changed my entire life based on that concept. That I got to a point in my life where I was like, I'm doing all the shadow work around this thing, but not dealing with this part of myself, which is that I am allowing myself to be subservient to the whims and patterns and behaviors of other people, rather than fully engaging with what is true for me, and kind of burying my head in the sand about certain things and not leaping. And I wrote on the blog somewhere that the shadow work in the universe, however you want to perceive it, was saying, you need to fucking jump, woman. And my brain was being like, yeah, but this and this and this, and what about that, and hurting this person and doing this, and then what people will think of this, and that, like, all of this around me. And I knew that going through the process was trial by fire, because it was not an easy choice to make. And it was effectively proactive shadow work in a very tangible way. It was much more of a tangible shadow work than it was necessarily just a spiritual shadow work. So some people do shadow work and it's much more about being in the spiritual space, and I do that too. But this was much more of a physical, tangible life, drastic life change that took physical journeys, physical change, physical like cutting off of things, and it was and is not an easy thing to do. And I've had moments where I've been like, what am I doing? What am I doing at this age? Like upheaving my life and changing everything all over and all the rest of it. But when I got to and it's not an end point, but when I got to a certain point, it then took on elements of, yeah, now I feel 1,000% lighter, 1,000% freer. And while some of it still is difficult, and I'm still struggling with elements of that shadow work and that journey from A to B, and there's still things that churn up in dreams and whatnot, it still feels that the end result was worth the difficulty of shifting my entire life, which I did. I changed my entire life completely because of really, honestly, truly dealing with shadow work that now needed to be dealt with. So, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel fair for a long time. But in the end, you're like, I got something that I really needed, and it was so valuable. I just had to crawl through the crappy sewer like Andy in Shawshank to like get it.
Yeah, I feel like it's finding a more truthful version of you a lot of times too. Like things have to kind of go away, and things that you may have loved, but it wasn't a healthy interaction, or it didn't really feed a healthy part of you as much as you did love it. And that in that, even though there's a mourning for what was there, there's still a lot of celebration for the lightness, like Joey said, that is there afterwards. And you tend to, I don't know, your arms are emptier to embrace more things then, I find. I was more willing to be like, all right, what else is here? Let's see, after than I was before.
I was thinking about something that I've always said, though, and I have always said that given the choice between what is right and what is easy, I will always seek to make the choice for what is right. It's not necessarily that the right choice is always going to be difficult, but quite frequently the more difficult road, the road with more work, more self-work, more introspection, more pain sometimes, is more truthful, is more, like Cris said, more truthful to who we are, and is the right choice. Whereas it's not always the case, because sometimes the easier choice is the right choice, and we have to allow that to, not get set in stone and decide that every right choice is this and or we might even not know the choice, because that's something else, not knowing which choice is right or versus easy until hindsight is 20/20 and all that. But that's something that I've always felt like that, particularly in times of transition, I would rather do what is ultimately right, whether it be right for me or right for the situation, or and that's kind of, again, it's value judging, because you are looking at a situation and trying to figure that out for yourself. But I would much rather stand up for someone who I felt was being picked on, rather than go with the crowd. And that is an easy example for when that arises, that there is a choice between what is right and what is easy. It's easy to shrink into the background in a crowd and not stand up and not get yelled at and not get called names. It's easier not to stand up and talk about spirituality from a different perspective to a whole host of different people who are going with one thing, and you go against the grain by saying something else. There are many, many different examples, but for me, it's finding that element of, this is probably going to suck, but I feel like I need to.
This is probably going to suck.
Yeah, I love that. I was just thinking while you were talking about times where I thought, it's my truth and I'm scared to speak it. So it's probably a good idea. I might need to find the right time and the right words. But if it's my truth and I feel driven, but I feel scared, then it's probably a mission worth going on. And I've also recognized that when something's hard, but it's right, it's normally when it's something that won't necessarily benefit me, but it will probably directly benefit somebody else whom I profess to love or who deserves my respect. And doing the thing that's easier will normally be the thing that I know will benefit me, or at least get me off the hook. Knowing that like knowing somewhere deep down inside it's better to do the thing that's either going to be beneficial for the greatest number of people or not necessarily beneficial for me, then I think to myself, well, that's probably the right thing to do. I feel like I want to protect my status quo, even though I feel driven to do the thing that actually will probably unsettle me but will be more helpful for others. I do feel like I try to do that, and I've shadow worked times where I haven't done that. You know, I've looked back at my behavior and gone, I took the easy route. I chose not to stand up and be counted. Let me look at that again from a place of non-judgment. Very important. Not to look at it and go, well, I'm just a dick and that's just how it's going to stay, and this is evidence of it. It's better to be like, I'm dynamic and nuanced and complex, and this thing happened and I was too scared to stand up, and there are reasons for that, and I'm going to dive into the reasons for that, and I'm going to love myself and hold myself close while I do that work. You know, but I've definitely looked at that and thought, oh, I made the easy choice there, and it wasn't the choice I knew deep down in my soul was the right one.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we're rounding up. We're going to be finishing on the hour, so I'm going to put to chat that if you want to ask any questions, you've got 20 minutes in which to pose questions about...
Pixie has a question already in here. I've been waiting to ask.
Go for it.
It says, okay. Pixie Do says, what happens when dealing with shadow? You forgive others and create a void that gave you a fighter's motivation. Now in peace, it's like I'm missing the anger.
I think I'm going to need that repeated. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It says, what happens when dealing with shadow of others and create a void of that energy that gave you a fighter's motivation? And she says she's never dealt with this calm and peace, and it's like she's missing the anger.
So she feels that having done the shadow work has left her with a void of motivation. So
what do you do to
so needing to find a replacement for anger to motivate yourself, is that what we're talking about?
Oh, well, anger can be a very motivating force. There's no doubt. I think, the shadow work is very draining. One of the things that might have happened in this instance is that adequate protection in terms of cleansing and setting strong boundaries and working on refilling the tank after each session of shadow work, and just generally throughout the process, may not have been taken. Adequate steps might not have been taken. Even if we think we're doing the work that we need to do to like unhinge ourselves from what's gone on in the session afterwards and just like come back to a place of center, etc., and be rested and do self-care, sometimes it's actually not enough. Sometimes the steps we put into place we either don't honor, and we just go neck deep into it, and we don't actually think about the need for physical and mental self-care and rest, or we think we're doing what we should be doing, but it's not enough. It needs to be extra strong cleansing and clearing and self-care during shadow work. That may not have happened in this person's case. And so essentially I would recommend looking now at a process of self-care to actually completely unwind, relax, take all the tension out of the body, really look at self-care from every angle, so emotional, physical, spiritual and mental, and just maybe taking on less, reducing or eliminating stresses and energy zappers, because what's probably happened is you've fried yourself. Like you're tired, basically. It's not that the motivation isn't there. It's knackering. It's basically like running a huge psycho-spiritual marathon, and if you're not stopping for regular water, you know what I mean, then if you're pushing yourself, even if you didn't feel like you were at the time, you probably just need to relax, and then the motivation will come back naturally.
Maybe
I agree. I mean, there's an element of being, like just being, because that I feel like that, like the motivation thing is like this pushing thing to get to this place, like this marker, and it's like you've come a long way. Appreciate where you are right now, and rejoice in it for a second.
I was going to say, if going forward, because obviously the cleansing and everything that KellyAnn has talked about is important in the immediate moment. But if you're finding that you're still starving for something following that, then basically you need to replace your anger with a passion. You need to make friends with who you are and be passionate about self-care, about your journey, and about who you are as a spiritual individual. Because passion can be more motivating than anger. And we talked about this in the again in the other live chat, where I said move where the I deserve is. So instead of saying I deserve from outside of the self, I deserve this house, I deserve this, blah, 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 take it to inside of yourself. I deserve to be my friend. I deserve to be healed. I deserve to be loved, or whatever it is. And take a little bit of that sort of self-love and self-passion and whatever it is, and fill yourself on that thought instead. So become passionate about taking care of your needs. It doesn't have to be an ego trip. It can just be like, you know, I need this, so I'm going to be passionate in doing this. I'm going to enjoy doing this. I'm going to enjoy that time I have in the bubble bath. I'm going to enjoy going on into nature and doing whatever it is. I'm going to enjoy the parts of my life that I enjoy and celebrate the passion that I have for those things. Because what you're ultimately doing with shadow work is you are making friends with the parts of yourself which you're not friends with, and then are kind of riling you up on some level, or kind of, you know, brushing you up the wrong way on different levels. And when you internalize and become friends with that and move past the point where it is an enemy of the mind, then you have the ability to take the parts of yourself that feel a little more cohesive and then become passionate about who you are and the journey that you have progressed through to that point. So that's what I would say.
I love that answer. I think it's lovely. I think anger, when it's there, it does feel like the only thing that fuels you. And actually, it's funny because a lot of what we do in shadow work is we get rid of anger that we're not actually doing anything with. My anger is only sacred, I think, if it's a tool. So if I'm sitting around getting really, really angry about the situation with poverty and homelessness that's rising all the time in this country, but I'm not taking that anger and channeling it into going down to the fucking food bank and making a donation to the food bank, then the anger is not of use to me. It's rotting inside me. And it's rotted inside me a lot over the course of my life. It's been a huge narrative for me, just literally eating me alive. And I'm not using it. I'm not doing anything with it. It actually can be holy if you look at what you're actually angry about and use it. Actually, a lot of what we're using shadow work for is we're processing anger that we are not doing that with, that we're curling up with, or that is really overtaking us and haunting us. And I feel like if you've gotten to a point where you've actually processed that, you actually are not curling up with it anymore, then there is space. There is amazing space for action to take place now. There is amazing space, as Joey said, for passion to be more of a thing. Because really, it's alchemy. You're taking whatever you were angry about and you're turning it into passion. If you've processed the anger you were curling up with, there's more room in your life. You're a receptacle now for that good stuff to come through. But yeah, sometimes after shadow work, you can just want to lie down for a very, very long time. A very long time. Yes. So that's maybe part of it too, for sure.
Where's that question? So Now It's So Vivid says, how does one cope with self-care when it feels like being cowardly? Current events are grim. They are stabbing my shadow, and walking away from the horror of that feels cowardly.
Do you want to start, Chris, or shall I, or Joey? Either.
You can go ahead, Kelly.
Cool. So you know what? Society is actually set up so that self-care and self-love feel cowardly. That is in the interest of a great many people, that you believe that caring for yourself is cowardly and is the wrong thing to do. And if you look at some of the narratives and some of the dynamics and the relationships in your life, but also in the way wider society is set up, or at least the society that most people watching this will be living in anyway, you will see that actually it's very beneficial. It's very advantageous to not only individuals in your life who want you to do what they want you to do, but it's also advantageous to systems. It's advantageous to systems of government. It's advantageous to, different industries that are trying to sell you shit that they're trying to convince you that you need. It's advantageous to your place of employment. People that don't want you to take sick days, people that don't want you to bow out and say, I need to prioritize myself. It's actually you're committing an act of holy rebellion when you say, no, you know what, self-care is important to me, because you're going against a systematic brainwashing. You're in the middle of a propaganda machine that says that self-care is cowardly. So really you need to start to think a little bit more like a spiritual revolutionary and say it's actually beneficial and advantageous to people and systems and ideologies that I believe that self-care is selfish and cowardly. And the minute that I unhinge myself from that machine and say, no, it's fucking not, then I think you elevate yourself to a whole new, you level up, baby. That's really leveling up spiritually, is to say, no, I need this not only for myself, but so I can be of service in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That was something I dealt with at the one job where I was a manager. Would lift standards so high, just a little bit high to achieve, it was impossible to achieve. And they did it on purpose. And once I was a manager, I realized they did it on purpose so that they would constantly be working harder. The issue with that comes is when people burn out. Because they were basically told, like, no, you don't take days off. You don't, you don't have your own life. You come all the time, whenever we need you, and you are 120% all the time. Is as great as it is to strive to be more and to put your heart into things and work hard, there's a time where it is just as great to realize you need that self-care, and you need that day where your head is not in it and your body is exhausted and you need to sleep. Relax. And they should also be understanding of that. But you said our society has built that kind of expectation that everyone is always on 100% all the time. And we're not a switch that's stuck. Sometimes we're capable of being off.
And filling 8 million different roles as well. So, it's filling so many different roles that you have to work this amount of hours. And if you're a mother on top of that, then you have to be working X amount of hours because it's expected. A lot of stay-at-home mothers get a lot of grief these days because they're not pulling their weight and it's not seen as a real job, things like that. And there's all different roles to fill that people are expected to give 110%. And even in, like, because I've seen my sisters deal with it, even within like the mother realm, it's like, oh, well, your kids should be eating all organic food and they should be doing this and they should be doing that. And if you're not in the place to fulfill that because of whatever, then people feel like they're failing because they're not ticking every single box that they're being told that they should be to the nth degree with regards to their children, their home life, their livelihood, their job, their everything.
And it works because, unfortunately, because it feeds this like lack of self-worth. It feeds this low self-confidence, catch-22 cycle, and it makes them essentially feel like they need to be there because still accept me even though I don't hit their goals.
Yeah. And what I wanted to say something else as well, the shaming that goes on. I feel like if you give yourself permission to not be shamed and to say, to say to yourself, that's really cute if that's your opinion, but I need to rest and that's what I'm going to do. You give other people around you permission to do the same. The shaming's going on in webs all over the place and nobody wants to be the first one to say, actually, I need compassionate leave. I need to take this time off. I need to leave early today. I need to get this doctor's appointment. I'm not going to be shamed. That's what I need. I feel like the first person to do that actually inspires that same permission in others sometimes.
That happened. When I left, actually, there's no one left in my department now. In that store, they all have left and found
that speaks volumes.
Yeah. So following on from that, Violet asked, I have found a shadow of I'm not good enough. So how do you go forward after finding a shadow archetype rooted in your self-worth, which is kind of what we just touched on with regards to self-worth there. So
trying to find it again. Can you repeat that?
Okay. Hang on, I'll find it again.
I'm not good enough?
Yeah, that I'm not worth it. And how do you move past finding that as part of your shadow work?
For me, it was a moment of like, is this how I want to live the rest of my life? Like, is this the voice that I want the whole time to be in the foreground? Like, do I want to run my life? This, this fear of not being good enough, or this a constant approval thing, this walking on eggshells on everyone, when like inside there, I know who I am. I know what I want. And I know that to want it like that is obviously enough somewhere in me. So there's a degree of like just kind of checking in. And I guess for me, like, because of all of the death elements that happened with a lot of my stuff in the last few years, like that was the biggest one for me, is just like, life is short. I am quite mortal. How am I spending my time? Let's prioritize here. Like, what I want to do with my energy is tell myself I'm not good enough, is believe that I'm not good enough and live a life. If I don't believe that I'm not good enough, why am I here? Obviously I'm here and I have a purpose, and I have people that I love and things that I do to help. So I must be enough. Then how do I want to spend my life? What is important to me? What do I want to change? What is, what passion do I want to put into action? How KellyAnn was talking about.
Yeah.
For me, it also came around with unpicking where the voice was coming from. That voice that's like, you're not good enough. Because 9 times out of 10, it doesn't start with you. Most children don't go around telling themselves they're not good enough. They just play and they talk to other kids and they connect. And most children don't have that complex. They find it somewhere as they grow into teenagers and into adulthood. There's a voice from somewhere. It's not always completely external, because I think then we do build on it ourselves and we internalize different voices and make it into our own inner dialogue. But a lot of it can come from outside of the self. Some of it can come from the social perceptions of what is accepted, what is normal, what is good enough. Some of it can come from individuals. I know that a lot of my problems comes from my mother's voice in my head, because nothing was ever good enough. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And I have to take myself to the point where I reject that dialogue that has been internalized and say, you know what? No, I've been, yeah, exactly. Give yourself permission to love who you are, is a comment that Julie just said in the chat, because rejecting that dialogue was the first major step for me, becoming aware that that dialogue was in my head, and then rejecting it, and then focusing on getting back to that innocent space, and to that, what would your inner child would have told you before all this nonsense started? What would that inner child have said about you? Like, really, like, are you being true to that innocent, wide-eyed desire to be who you are in the world without shame? So that was, for me, it was a big part of like rejecting the dialogue of you are not enough. And it's an ongoing.
There was a video a while back that KellyAnn actually made. It was about Dizzy.
Oh yeah, Dizzy.
Yeah. Yeah. And how different pieces of yourself and have a conversation with them and talk to them about that. And like my own version of Dizzy, as you were talking about that, I'm like, you know what, that's brilliant. Like, that gives you a way to get back to that little kid who just wants to have fun and be heard. How frustrating was it to go up to a parent when you were little and be like, hey, excuse me, hey, and you had something that was really important, you were so passionate about, and get like, yeah, go away. That silenced feeling, and you just want to express and be and live and do. And yeah, sometimes you can be a little irresponsible, but and that needs to be checked. But there's still a place for that in you and in your life, and that's personally really helped me, is the realization that you can interact with them like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about looking at if you have any memories that were of you before you didn't think you were enough. And then obviously you've got to look at the memories, the earliest things you can remember of feeling like you weren't good enough. It's like you go back to those roots, and you can totally have an interaction with both the kid that you were before these feelings came in, and then the person that you started to become as the messages or the experiences started to taint your relationship with yourself. And then I also think Cris made a really good point about figuring out like why do you want to change it, essentially. Like, what could you be doing with your life if this wasn't around? That's the biggest motivator for me. I see something in my shadow and I think, why do I want to deal with this? What's the point of it? What will happen to me, my life, my commitments, my energy levels, my way that I am with other people if I don't have this anymore? and I can see quite clearly the vision, and that helps me to understand why it's causing such a problem. Because I think to myself, I'd have more patience, I'd have more consistency, I'd believe I could, you know, and I think to myself, shit, this really needs to be integrated. And then, you know, essentially after that, I think you set yourself challenges. You set yourself challenges in terms of doing the deep work, like journaling, the card draws, talking to a counselor, whatever the case may be. And then you also set yourself challenges for when you're actually going out and living your life. Practically, when the feelings of not being good enough come in, you have an opportunity every single time to choose differently. And that's what Joey said earlier, the proactive shadow work, where you're actually doing it. You're doing shadow work by taking action. So it's not just about sitting down and journaling and saying, okay, my first memory of not feeling good enough was in the playground when I was, you know, whatever. And then that's very important. The mapping is important, but so is saying, today there'll be at least one opportunity for me to choose the path of not being good enough, or to choose it differently. And I'm going to choose differently. And that will be part of my work as well. And then the other thing I would say, if you found this part of shadow and you want to start working with it, is just a gentle warning that nothing in the shadow exists in isolation. You cannot just go in and work this one bit and then just back out. You will go in and you'll say, okay, I want to go to the part of me where I don't feel good enough. And then as you start to examine the memories and the experiences that occurred to make you not feel good enough, you will think, shit, I need to shadow work my relationship with my sibling, because that was a big part of it. And I need to shadow work how I feel about school, because a lot of it came in then. And you'll realize that it's not just a simple case of going in, tinkering with one pipe or cog and then leaving. But that's okay. But you just have to be prepared for that, because it's connected in a web to other things as well.
It's like it's in your family tree, and then you just realize that there's cousins.
Oh, it's like loads of cousins over here. Yeah, exactly. You're so good with analogies, Cris. It's brilliant. I love it.
So we're going to ask one last question, because I think this is important, and we're wrapping up on the hour, and KellyAnn has to go. But I think it's important to answer this question. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to put it to everybody else. So Ryan, I might be pronouncing that, butchering that beautifully, says, how do you start? What is the first step to fixing yourself? The first step is realizing that you don't need fixing.
Yep.
You don't need fixing. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about probably making friends with all the elements of yourself more than anything. That's how if you wanted one phrase to sum up how I see shadow work, that would be it. It's about making friends with the parts of yourself that for some reason feel demonized.
Yeah.
So
power through understanding. You recognize the power in that, through understanding that side of yourself, instead of wanting to fix it or maybe label it even as something else. You accept like that raw side of you and the benefits of it as well.
Yeah, I think that it's the language, isn't it? Fixing yourself. To me, like every time someone says something like that, or I read something like that, I react to it. I have almost a physical reaction to it. It does something to my insides. I'm just like, no, that's not it. That's how things end up so far down in shadow. That's how it ends up in shadow in the first place, because we think we have to fix it. We have to mold ourselves. We have to polish ourselves and carve ourselves into a much politer shape, so that we'll be accepted, and so that we can put forth,
file off our sharp edges.
We can project an energy of success or having everything together and not really deal with it. It's only once
then you realize. Sorry, go ahead.
You carry on.
Oh, I was going to say, but then you realize that the sharp edges are needed to cut the sharp edges.
Oh, you froze up. That was weird. You like sharp edges.
I was just gonna say, and you realize that you need those sharp edges, because that's how you cut things away.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, right?
In your life. You know, it's like the water that molds the rock over time. Like that you need that.
Yeah. One of the biggest things I ever shadow worked about was anger, rage, anger. I was just a really, really, really angry human. I got convinced that there was a little bit of blood in my anger stream. I was made of anger, right? And I feel like it took me a really long time to understand that I do have a propensity to be really angry. I do. It's not gone away. it's, you know, it's in me from my genealogy, and it's in me because of the things that I've been through, and because during my formative years I was angry, I had to defend myself, I was being threatened, I was in a situation where I constantly felt angry at home and at school. It's not about shading that away, it's not about trying to get rid of that. Once I try to push it down, it comes up. What you resist persists, what you suppress predominates, you know, like the old axiom. I realised it's okay for me to say, I know myself and I've got a bit of a temper. I know that I have a tendency, if I feel cornered or if something isn't going in the way that I've micromanaged it in my head, I have a tendency to get angry. It's not about saying, I don't do that anymore, I'm not like that anymore. It's about saying, I know I'm like that, so let me check it now. I don't want to walk into this situation like this. I've got a duty to myself and others around me to recognise I have a propensity for rage. And if I go down this road and I do this thing, I'm going to end up behaving in a way that is not in alignment with my higher self. It's that. It's not saying I'm not an angry little fuckface anymore. It's saying I do have a tendency to be angry. Some things trigger me back to when I was 15, and I get this feeling that I have to protect myself, but it's nobody else's fault. I can't make anyone else suffer for it. I've got to do the right thing. That's what shadow work is. It's not saying, oh, I've swept that away now, thank God that's gone.
Yeah.
It'll always be with me. It will always be with me, but I don't let it control me anymore. And that's what you're doing. You're not fixing yourself. You're gaining, as Cris said, power through understanding.
Yeah, because there are times that you need that anger. There are times that anger is a very good tool to have.
Yeah,
it's just, it's not all the time.
Yeah, it's a good signpost as well. If you can learn when it comes along, you can actually say, I'm in a danger zone here. This isn't good for me. I don't feel respected and accepted here. That's why I'm feeling angry. So you know what? Let me love myself and walk the fuck out. Let me do that. That is a good sign. My anger, when it comes up, I do go, what does this mean? Does this mean I shouldn't be here? Does this mean I'm letting myself be devalued? Thank you, anger, for letting me know that. But I'm not going to channel it towards, you know, breaking something. I'm going to channel it towards living.
I think like the epitome of shadow work is turning to something that you feel like has essentially just smacked you in the face and going, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Like that's
so true.
Well, that's a whole other live stream, Cris.
True. It is true. It's a blessing. It's like earlier when I was talking about when stuff prods your shadow, and you have to see it as like, okay, well, that is Cosmos has come in and said, hey, I'm just leaving this post-it here, that this is also something else you might want to look into. And you have to see it as a blessing. And I have to see the people that come along and rattle my cage as gurus. They're not gurus in a conscious way. They're not sitting down and, you know, giving me a satsang or anything, but they are my gurus. They are my teachers.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you know what, thank you for that.
I've learned tolerance from the intolerant, silence from the talkative, and
oh, I don't know. I like that though.
Oh my gosh. There's a quote. It's like 3 lines, and it's like, I've learned Magpie. If you're in here, I know you know it because you're the quote collector.
Yeah, I was going to say Magpie.
But it's basically, I've learned silence from the talkative, tolerance from the intolerant, and something else from something else. And it ends, I should not be ungrateful to these teachers.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. I'm going to find that as soon as we finish.
I'll find it.
That's great.
Anyway, we are going to have to wrap up because KellyAnn is due to leave. So thank you very much for coming on live with us, KellyAnn. Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah. You can find me on YouTube. I'm KellyAnn Maddox, just my name. And then I'm online at kelly-annmaddox.com. And I'm uploading Self-Love September videos the whole of next month. So I'm just focusing purely on self-love, which will be enjoyable. And I upload fairly regularly. Sometimes I slope away for a few weeks because that's honest. And who wants to be on a timetable of rigidity? That's just weird. So I might go away. But usually I'm around chatting and drinking tea.
So there you go. I will make sure all the links are added after we have another live chat coming after this one. So I will make sure everybody's links are in once both the videos have gone live and everything, because Mercury retrograde being what it is,
what the hell?
Everything was but I will make sure
ever since I woke up. Like I had to light some sage to just like
yeah.
Oh my God, Cris.
Start talking.
Cris, please watch the beginning of this live stream, like because
Oh,
later, because honestly, I was like, I can't do it on my phone, and my computer's overheating, and I don't know what to do. And Joey was like, "Bitch, we're live," and I was like, "Oh, hi guys, hi everyone."
It shouldn't have been live either. KellyAnn joined the chat and it just went live, and I'm like, what?
Live when I logged in here, I just kind of tumbled in loud, and then when you guys were like, "Oh yeah, by the way,"
Hi,
oh,
yeah.
I know, it's like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain now.
we have destroyed the illusion.
Please have me again. This was absolutely amazing. I'd love to do this again.
Oh, by
yeah,
all means.
I would love that.
Yep, me too. I would, because I love chatting about shadow work and things of this nature.
Also,
Right.
Man.
Yeah, I did that at the beginning. I gushed at the beginning before you got here.
Well, no, she was the first person I found on here that was a follower of hell.
Yeah, same in return.
Kelly,
I was like, yeah. Fireworks. I was like,
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will be having another live chat in 5-10 minutes where we will be talking about the paranormal. So if you want to hang around, you can come chat to us for that. Thank you so much to KellyAnn for taking time out of her busy schedule to come chat with us. Thank you for bearing with us through Mercury retrograde. And we will catch you soon. So many blessings to you guys, and thank you for joining us.
bye.
bye.